What's up, strength coaches? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring. And today we have Jason Weber. You got two PhDs on the show today, folks. All right, this is gonna be a good one. Jason, you are the CEO of Speed Sig. What is Speed Sig, and why is it something that our members need to know about?
Hey, Justin. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. In a nutshell, with SpeedSig, we take the single sensors, so the catapult units that guys are using in sport, everything from football to soccer, as you call it in the US, baseball, and we're able to run or develop, measure running mechanics. So everything that we're talking about in the research, JB Moran's work, Peter Wayne, Aki Salo, all of that work, Ken Clark with his thigh angular velocity, all of that work we're able to give feedback to coaches. And more than that, we do it at scale. So you can do multiple players at once. And when we start getting into it, and I'm sure we will, part of understanding your athletes is really understanding what genuine change is.
How are you guys able to do that then? Because that sounds awesome. Like you said, a lot of people are interested in thigh angular velocity, and it's a hot topic. How is it able to be done then?
So I guess this is part of where the PhD thing comes in. Is I spent my PhD took because I was working full time and high performance manager in the AFL in Australia, and
Gosh,
my
good for you,
PhD
man.
took. Yeah, let's see. Are we recording pictures here so people can see I've got no hair?
Yeah, same.
Yeah. It's a strength and conditioning thing, right? High testosterone. Anyway, that's what I'm claiming anyway, man. Yeah, like, mate, I spent a lot of time. Once once the problem became bad enough for me in my practice that we needed to have a way to quantify running. And when I say bad enough, I mean when I could see things happening, but the staff around me, and I had a lot of staff working for me at the time, you needed to have a way to communicate to them. So in that case, your physiotherapists, which in the US, your physical trainers, your athletic trainers, your doctors who are often not there, they often push information back to the head senior coach. And so having a common language that we could all utilize. Now, you and I, we could stand on the field and we could talk about ground contact time, and we could talk about thigh angular velocity and all those things. But even you and I would have an opinion, and an opinion's like standing around a water cooler and throwing information around. Like, it's not much better than that. So I really wanted to find a way to measure it so that as a coach, I knew that like there was some feedback for me that what I'm seeing, am I actually seeing it? Because when you're coaching, and particularly in team sports, we had 50 players at a time on the field. And that's a lot of people. Now I've got a lot of American college football teams you work with, and come spring, they got 100 guys on the field. So trying to understand that is massive. So I guess number one was spend a lot of time understanding the sensors, how they work, and how to make really repeatable systems so that we could get let's call it our scientific method right up as close as we can to the game. We don't measure in a game, but we measure running on the field, and we measure deceleration on the field. So it's as specific as we can get. But yeah, how we do it was based on a lot of study and a lot of, reading all that work. Ken Clark, I mentioned those authors, Peter Wayne, JB Moran. There's a ton of work out there that inspires the ability to go out and chase these sort of data points.
Anybody that's listening might be like, okay, can you help me out with running asymmetry then? Is that things that can be done too?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at left versus right limb, and that's obviously running asymmetry and asymmetry in general. You on independent force plates, everyone wants to know like left versus right. So we always start with, we got three principles. We profile, we monitor, we communicate. So profiling is the most important thing in my mind, because there's enough research out there that says people are going to be asymmetric. People are not always going to be balanced. People do things on one side. And the classic I was in the States only a month or two ago. And when you get into it and start talking to people, and you get a wide receiver who runs predominantly off one side of the field. So his routes, let's say if he's on the right side of the field, are really right leg heavy because he's cutting away. So if that's what he does, who am I to say that he's right or wrong? He's developed that strength. So what we do is profile. So number one, understand what your athlete is. So before you go making a decision around what's right or wrong with an athlete, understand what they are. Compare them to your population. So specifically, you want to compare them to similar player groups. So you don't want to be comparing your tight ends to your wide receivers because they're different beasts, right? Very different beasts. Same in soccer or football. Your wing backs are very different to your centre backs because they're just faster, different running catch. Your centre backs are big dudes who want to create contact and beat people up as much as you can in soccer, right?
You can call it football. Our American audience, I call it American football over here when I make posts. So yeah, it's football and American football. They can deal with it.
Cool. It doesn't bother me, man. I grew up with soccer. That's what we have in Australia. It's still a white ball, right? But yeah, you talk to the purists and they'll start trying to kick you in the shins if you're saying if you call it soccer. Yeah. So look, man, the thing for us, here's my opinion, right? Is that I think as S&C coaches and sports scientists and wherever that blend is between the two, our industry has to keep getting better. Yep. I think my opinion still is of myself, I need to be better. I don't think at times, you're measuring things. And I've been going since 1996, right? So I've been a long time in the gig.
Jeez. Anybody listening right now, it's 2023, so give you some context.
Yeah. And so we start measuring stuff and you want to know, well, actually, am I measuring the right thing? Is this actually working?
Yes. So
part of that journey and the PhD was me really making myself accountable. Like, am I doing the right thing? I have a very strong view that our responsibility is to the athlete. Like, we hold their careers in our hands, and asking them to do pointless things or stupid things or whatever. I'm not saying don't be creative, but we have a responsibility, okay? So in that respect, I wanted to be better. I wanted to offer my community, which is my strength and conditioning brothers, tools that we could use in practice that make us as a profession better. So when you're looking at a runner, and there are going to be coaches who are more experienced than us that can see, okay, there's that difference there. But he needs to communicate it to other people. And other people might be the head coach. It might be the medical staff. You might say, look, like I did quite a high profile Achilles tendon rupture recently in Australia. Now, I wasn't responsible for running the rehab, but I was overarching, looking at it, quantifying it with Speed Sig. And we were able to, there was actually the person running it was a physiotherapist. And he was doing a really good job and he got the strength back fantastic and was going great. But then he tried to push too fast with the speed. He tried to go too quick. And I already could see that his vertical and horizontal signals were just too low. And I was simply able to say to him, hey, man, like, you've got great strength. You've ticked that box. But that strength hasn't been able to come across into his running yet. So he has to assimilate that strength. He's got motor control that he needs to reorganize to get his strength going and deliver it on the field. You're not there yet. Don't push him. And he was okay because we had data in front of us. We slowed it down. Mate, I think it was like 12 days later, we got the signal back up and he was off and going. So I think...
What's up, strength coaches? Taking a quick break away from the show to let you know about our membership site. Not only do we at Strength Coach Network put out the Cheeky Midweeky, but we have a membership site where you gain access to a video library and a members-only forum. Inside the video library, you will have access to over 170 different lectures, which equals over 400 hours of content. Inside of these content, it is every sport you could think of and every topic in strength and conditioning. In our members-only forum, we have career advice and we have topics in strength and conditioning where coaches ask each other questions and we help each other inside the network. You can try the network out for 24 hours for $1 if you are not a member. Click the link down below and you will be able to check us out.
The journey for us with SpeedSig and for me has been about, it's quite utopian. I'm trying to be better for our profession. I want to be better. I've learned a lot. Now, go on, man, you got a question?
Nah, man, I'm listening. You're good. Yeah, keep going.
Put me up on a soapbox and I tick over and over. Too much coffee, man. Like really, I think that contributes to the bald head somehow.
I mean, I'm a big coffee drinker too, so so far you're 2 for 2.
So, I mean, and I've probably lost the train of thought I was going to go on to there, but yeah, I mean, I think we've got to strive to be better. There's actually in Australia this past week, the Australian Physiotherapy Association has come out sort of bad mouthing our professional, what they call accredited exercise physiologists, which are our, like I'm qualified as one of those as well, but it's the professional, like your clinical type S&C guys. And I'm like that's wrong. And if it is wrong, well, then we should do something about it. I'm not going to stand by and sook about it. Then I want to be better. So when we're out in the field and we're discussing running mechanics of a player rehabilitating, I want to understand it. When we're looking at a player who's fatigued, right? I want to understand that. When you get the subacutes, particularly in any contact sport, basketball, anything where you get that VMO cork, and all of a sudden they're just not running right, right? And that then persists, and they get another whack on it. So it's now 2 or 3 weeks they've been running a little bit weird. That's when you end up with a calf tear, or you end up with something silly otherwise that wasn't the original injury. So again, I think it comes back for me to just trying to be better. I think there was a huge, huge gap for me in what we're measuring. I mean, I was lucky enough to be right at the forefront. One of the first teams when I was with our national rugby team in the early 2000s to get a full rack of GPS and off and go. But you turn them on and you go, well, what do we do with these things? Now, 10, 15 years later, we're covering an immense amount of ground, but it's not enough. We can't stop with what, right? What reps, what distance, all that type of thing. You need to talk about how. And you see the research, like the guys like your Ken Clarks are pushing that barrier along. And I love that work. I love it, but it drives me mad if there's no way for us to use it at scale.
One of the things that I thought of as I'm hearing you talk about this is like, okay, is this a possible way for having a 1080, for lack of
Yeah.
a comparison? Like, okay, hey, somebody can't afford a 1080, but they can get the same metrics by using Speed Sig. Are they able to get, ground contact time, flight
Yep.
time? You said thigh
Yep.
angular velocity, like, hop into the weeds more with it.
Yeah. So we can definitely do those things. We're actually releasing a new set of software in December, which has thigh angular velocity, it has split, which is the distance between your femurs, contact in front of the center of mass, all that stuff that's being talked about at the moment. We got it all going on. Um, it's very different to a 1080 in that a 1080 has some other magnificent applications. I've not worked with a 1080, but
Yeah,
they,
neither have I. That's why I
yeah,
was wondering
but
it,
yeah.
because they're
So
expensive.
they have, yeah, no, they have some good things, but their ability to do resistance and all that sort of stuff gives it another dimension, right? But here's my thing: teams spend a fortune on your GPS IMU units, whether it's from Catapult or StatsBoard or whomever, right? They spend a fortune, and I used to do the same thing in my practice. I had to sign the annual check, and it wasn't my money, but you still sign for it. So so I always thought, well, the sensors you got on board there, are we really using them all? So for whatever amount of money you're paying, you're probably using 50, 60% of its ability. Why don't we exhaust that, drain that? Let's use all the sensors. Let's figure out where else we can use them. And that's kind of been my pursuit the whole time. Like I always say, you should have a running description of yourself, I reckon. And I'm a strength and conditioning coach that does science stuff, right? So I'm a coach first who went and did a PhD to answer the questions in my practice, S&C practice.
That's awesome to hear, because a lot of the times, like you said, I feel like people will get some technology without asking the question first. Like I saw it firsthand at my old school. They dropped like 50K on these three motion capture devices that
Man,
nobody ever used, and they weren't actually good. Like it literally was collecting dust. And the fact that you're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen with something that people spend a lot of money on, bravo to you on that, because you're right. Getting those pieces of technology are not something to bat an eye at, especially for people that, for our American audience, are at a college where the budget is tight.
Yeah, and exactly. And I mean, I'll throw another piece to that. When you mention motion capture, markerless motion capture, and all that sort of stuff, like that's all great, and there's some real applications there. And I must say, like I've supervised one PhD in markerless motion capture, so I know the tech really well. But when I said earlier, you want to understand change. The way to understand change is to capture data regularly, so you have a genuine profile of that individual. Then you can start to see what changes. When you capture data on 3 or 4 steps, 3 or 4 steps can be borderline noise. And if you do it, let's say once every 8 to 10 weeks or 6 months, even worse, how do you know if it's changed, or how do you know if the kids just decided on that day to do something weird? Who knows? So I think that piece for mine has always been about where can we get the data that gives us the best consistency in signal? What gives us the best ability to determine sensitivity to change, which is a critical element of what I wrote my PhD on.
Anybody listening this far is going to be like, all right, this guy clearly knows his stuff. I mean, you were a high performance manager for a while. Talk about, your background a little bit to better educate everybody on, how you got into this field. Like, what was your genesis story into it? Because it's awesome
Yeah,
to hear that you're a coach that does science stuff, because I feel like the pendulum has swung too far right now.
yeah, yeah. And mate, we might write that one down in your notebook. We might come back to that point because I think it's very salient. My journey. I was the athlete that was probably really good at high school, and the further we went up the chain, probably wasn't quite as good. Um, Probably more of a good athlete than I was a rugby player. Um, but in doing that, I met a coach along the way. Um, some of you may know, if you're old enough, a guy by the name of Ian King. Now, some might. He wrote a book that was very extensively published, and Ian was a was a different cat without question. But I remember sitting there as an athlete going, man, who are you? What do you do? Why are you, where did you come from? He's sitting there, he's going through all this test data, he's creating programs. I'm like, wow, what is this? Anyway, fast forward, rugby career doesn't go too far. And it was all amateur in those days anyway. Um, but this university course starts at the University of New South Wales, sports science. I was lucky enough to get in, took off from there, but it's been, to be honest, an absolute, I don't know, love affair. I'm entirely besotted by the idea of figuring out how to help our athletes. So that started, I did a bachelor's degree. No one at that time, no one knew what you did. Like, well, okay, you got this degree. What the hell do you do? And this was back, that was, they're still saying it now. But that was 1989. So I went and did a master's degree straight after it, figuring, well, if I'm going to have a piece of paper, I might as well have a bigger one than everybody else.
Right.
So I did that, and then I promptly handed in my thesis and walked the earth for a couple of years. So I went to your neck of the woods. I drove across the US twice, worked in Canada on ski patrol, did all that stuff, and then came back to Australia when rugby went pro. And so I had some buddies working in around that. And like everybody, I came in at the development level, worked with the young ones, worked my way up, ended up, so we have Super Rugby in Australia. So I worked in that for two different teams for about 100 games, which is a couple of years. Then did the national team for 2 World Cups, the Rugby World Cup having just finished recently. Then I moved out from there. I was looking at the American model of private facilities and how that worked. And I'd really had a look at the D1 environment and tried to do that in Australia, but it didn't quite work. And the financial crisis 2008 hit. So I got an offer to go into the AFL. So I went to the AFL as a high performance manager. So that means I had 3 S&C coaches, 3 physios, a couple of docs, the whole thing. So I ran that out until 2020, till the COVID thing, and that the budgeting and all that. My contract finished, so I finished up then. But the aim always was, if what I was trying to do in my head with SpeedSig made sense. So the first caveat was, does it make sense to me? Then does it make sense to a supervisor? And then does it make sense to my staff? Yeah. So then we started to branch out and said, well, maybe this is a business. And it's taken a number of years. Like, we've only been commercial since February, but we've had a lot of years of asking the question of people, like, you've got this, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And the feedback has been pretty clear that it works. It detects what we're seeing on the field, and it's helping people make good decisions. So that's been the story.
Anybody listening right now, I mean, shout out to the homies TK, Zach, and Devin, because I mean they're people that are using it, and they're also coaches that do science stuff too. So yeah, if you're interested in that, obviously check out their SpeedSig Instagram, and they've talked about the different people that they're working with within the States. One of the things that you just said that really resonated with me was talking about being that high performance manager. I feel like that's something that's completely bastardized over here in America and in the States. If you think that I'm wrong, please tell me, but like, talk to me about what it really is and how my impression
Yeah.
of it in the States is just completely wrong.
No, you listen, Justin. I think it's a friend of mine would say it's a movable feast. It's a different thing to different people.
Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button so that way you get notifications of when more content like this gets released. So click that like and subscribe button. And with that, let's get back to the show.
Um, I'll tell you my quick spin on it. So the way I always saw my environment was, I saw it like a teaching hospital. So the idea was, yep, I'm top of the tree, I get it, but you don't just earn the badge, right? You've got to help people, and the way you lead is by showing people the light in the dark, right? How do you bring light into the dark and help people, direct them? So I always spent a lot of time helping my staff develop, and in doing so, that helps me develop because I'm seeing different things. When you hear things coming out of your mouth, what you're saying, you get a great feedback loop. Did that make sense, what I just said? Keep rechecking yourself, recheck. And everything, I got this stupid thing I used to always talk about, like with the Terminator. When Arnie
Yeah.
walks into the biker bar?
Yeah.
You know that movie.
Yeah.
When he walks into the biker bar and he's nude? Well, I used to do that at work. I'd come in nude and, no, sorry, that's a lie. I didn't do that. But when he walks in nude and you see his eyes, and from his view, his point of view, you can see all the data coming down and he's checking everything out. So he's constantly evaluating everything. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to constantly evaluate patterns. Now, as a high performance manager, you're going to evaluate those patterns in your staff. So what are they good at? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do I bring people together? How do I put 10 people and get them on the same direction? Right? So trying to pick those people. I was very, very fortunate within the AFL structure I worked in. I was given really good leeway to get some great people. I've had staff there that are now firmly friends. I've got 3 of my S&C coaches have all gone on to, 2 of them have gone on to high performance manager roles themselves. And the last one is the youngest one. He'll go through soon. So we were able to bring together a really strong group of people. So I think my view of it is to run a team from that high performance perspective, you need to be able to understand the shoes other people are walking in. So I need to understand physio. Yes. I need to understand. So with a physio, right? So I had a lot of trouble in my first year with this very senior physio who's about 7 or 8 years older than me. But I used to go into the practice and I'd show him I'd actually learnt. I know a lot about physio. I know a lot about hands. I've worked with a lot of track and field guys. So, very much the Dan Pfaff, dare I say it, the Charlie Francis kind of idea. Like Charlie Francis was a magnificent masseur, like with his athletes. He understood muscle tone. And I learnt a lot. I never met the man Charlie Francis. I wish I had, rest in peace. But man sounded like a genius to me, and I learnt a lot off him. Some of the first rugby tours I went on as a kid, when I was like in the 90s, it was me and the physio. So I had this great physio back in the day, a lady named Linda Bennett. She taught me how to do a lot of practical stuff. So I would do the preliminary physio work, hand them over her. She'd do the specialist stuff, and we just churn all the dudes through when you're away on tour. So having that shared experience, though, means when I talked to an AT or a PT, and when I did it in the States recently, some of them were shocked at what I understand. Because if you're going to lead, you need to understand that person's job. You can't just do it because I'm the biggest dude in the room, right? Doesn't matter that I am, but you've got to be able to walk a mile in their shoe and understand them. I can't do their job, mate. I'm not a physio. I'm not an AT, but I understand their role. So I had a discussion this morning. So we're talking to a kid plays rugby here. He's a very great, good young athlete. So he runs a 10-3-200. So he's sharp, man, real sharp. About 70. Oh, he's probably 80 kilos now. Big squat, two-handed dunk, standing under the ring, like the whole bit. Anyway, so he's had 4 hamstrings this year. So I'm talking to this young staff this morning because he's only a young guy. So the way it works in Australia, this guy's with some young staff. But what we did was sit round. We looked at some video. We looked at the Speed Sig data. I presented my piece. We had some MRI data there, and you bring it together. But the physio is comfortable to speak openly with me about the cross-sectional area of a biceps fem on MRI. Like I know exactly what that is. You can quantify that quite comfortably. Now, if you don't breed that confidence in people as a leader, then they separate, because people who are not confident will hold their cards close to their chest. They'll be protective. They'll go, this is my domain, back off. When people understand you're not trying to take their turf, you're trying to help them work together. That's what I think the high performance model should be, in my view. It's not the way it is everywhere, and it's not the way everybody runs it. And I will tell you, in the US, from what I've seen, there is everything from the worst possible, which is everybody working in silos and nobody speaks, to I've seen very excellent on the other side, like you mentioned, TK and the crew down at University of South Florida. I was super impressed. So to go into a room with a senior S&C coach, a physical therapist, a rehab speed specialist, and to be able to have a really strong conversation about what the program does, who works on what, how we work together, mate, it was cool. So I don't think America's got it wrong in any shape of the word. I think there are pockets that are doing it better than others. But I think the key is understanding that I know you can't be a sole specialist in one area and try and guide other people. A good leader should be able to understand all his troops and see where they fit.
Is it something truly just as simple as making sure that you have subdued your own ego, or is there some other magic trick to it?
No, I don't think there's magic. I think you're dead right. I think there's a piece, like I used to always say as a manager, I was an incredibly inclusive dictator. So what that means is
I like that.
that what we would do, I would always say, my door's always open. We're always going to discuss every issue. But if we get to an impasse and I've got 3 people saying one thing and 3 people saying another, I will decide. And when I decide, we're going to go that way. But you have to understand, I've given everybody a chance. I'll tell you why I'm going that way, but we have to be on board. And when we're together, we can argue in a private room, but in front of players, we never argue. And if you need to bring up a point and you're not happy with what I'm doing, that's cool. But come and tell me when you ask to come into the office and we'll talk. So, yeah, you've as a leader, you still have to at times make a decision and say, we're going this way, we're going A, not B. And that's it. And that's the responsibility of a leader. But I think to bring people together is the number one thing. I think you see whenever, I've been lucky enough to work around the tactical space a fair bit. And when you see the real good SF operators, how tight they are as brothers, it's because of shared experience, right? They've gone out and done, you talk about buds, they go and line the surf and get beaten up. The Delta boys run around the Appalachian Mountains, the SAS guys over here run around the desert. They've done this thing together. And you and I have had an experience that's so unbelievable. That's why they're so tight. We're never going to have that experience, but I think when you're in pro sport, it's so intense. It is a big experience. And when you get to go out to a stadium, like, college football's got 100,000 people. You go Virginia,
Yeah, I got an
VT,
LSU hat on right now. I mean, Death
yeah,
Valley, that
yeah,
place is like fucking rocking.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you go out to 100,000 people, man. I used to have a coach used to always say, when you go down the race, you go down the tunnel, you want to know that the guy beside you's got your back. And the players need that, but the staff need that. You want to have each other's back, mate, 100%. And that's, if you've got animosity, I'm the strength coach, and you just do the physio, it takes everybody. It takes a village.
Well, here's my question then to you, because I feel like a lot of the times over here in the States, and maybe it is over there too, but a lot of the times maybe that high performance manager might be an athletic trainer simply because they have a license versus strength and conditioning coaches just have a certification. Now, if you're not
That's an interesting one.
Go ahead, then dive with that, because it's like, how do you handle the dynamics if you are the strength coach and you have to be subdued to the AT, but then how do you also handle it if you're the high performance manager as the strength coach, and now you have to tell an AT kind of what to do, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. So number one, when you look at licensing has to do with the fact that they do needling, they put needles in, they manipulate necks, they do all that sort of stuff. We don't touch them, right? I don't need to be licensed. I'm not poking them with a needle. I'm not doing anything like that. And that's one of the arguments that came up in Australia just this past week, right?
Okay.
Why don't we have a license? Well, I don't invade their human space. I might get in their face periodically, but I don't.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't do invasive. I'm not moving them around. I'm not manipulating joints. But so when you look at most S&C coaches now, mate, there aren't many that aren't running around with at least an decent undergrad degree, and then they've gone other qualifications. And I've written about this before, and I'm clear. Mate, S&C coaches are not made at university. S&C coaches are made on the field, in the gym. That's where you learn your trade. You learn off somebody, another coach. I learned nothing about S&C at university. I've done 3 degrees, right? Nothing. But the underlying science and all that stuff, I got 100%. That's why we should do undergrad degrees. But all the S&C stuff that you've got to learn, and I would even argue for the fundamental qualifications, most guys are well past that. Most guys are well past it. They've got great knowledge. The fact that it's not necessarily recognised, I mean, in Australia, the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association are doing a good job at having more levels, right? So people they don't just get one, they go up in rank, so to speak. So I think there's a mute point there between, well, I've got a license and you don't. Well, stick it up your butt. But I think it comes back to then that humility piece. Don't try to rock people over. Try to understand, this is where I'm coming from, where you come from. I really believe that if you can understand someone else's job and what they do and how they feel about things and what they understand, I'd even go down to the fact that I understand there's 3 main physiotherapy schools in Australia. They're all quite different. So I understand if I find out one of my staff is from one school, that's a different perspective. Like University of WA, it's very different to the University of South Australia. And there are nuances to that. So it's Sun Tzu, the art of war, man. Know thy enemy, know thyself. Win 1,000 battles.
That's a fantastic point. And how did you, continue to learn and have that different growth mindset of you? Because there might be a lot of young strength coaches listening to this right now that are like, okay, how can I harness that? How can I learn that mindset? Because I do ultimately want that role that he's talking about.
Yeah. So I think number one, I always would say to young S&C coaches, go into the medical practice. If you need to ask, like a dojo, right? Ask to go in appropriately, but say, man, can I come in and just watch what you do?
What's up, strength coaches? Want to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about our sponsor, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is your one-stop shop for online training platform needs as a coach. With TeamBuildr, you're going to be able to program for your athletes, whether they're in person or remote. Using TeamBuildr, not only will you be able to program for your athletes, but there are special features such as the leaderboard and locking training with wellness questionnaires. With the leaderboard, you can have an exercise performed that day, whether it be a lift, a sprint, or a jump, and scores can be updated in real time and projected on a TV in the training. Wellness questionnaires can be used at the beginning of training, and your athletes will have to fill them out prior to being able to train. This ensures that as a coach, you're being able to collect quality data before the athletes train. So, if you're interested in TeamBuildr, click the link down below and find out more information. Let's get back to the show.
We've got Deshaun, whatever his name is, Smith over here. He's one of our best wide receivers. He's had this hamstring. So can you just explain to me exactly what you're doing? In the early days, you'll get the PTs and that they'll talk at you, but you start to learn and you build up that repertoire when you're a young one, right? And it's easier when you're young. Do it early. Learn radiology, learn to read MRIs, learn to understand what they look like, learn medical terminology, right? So that you speak their language, right? One of the common components of what they call neuro-linguistic programming, and it's the art of influencing people, right? Is learn their language. Don't speak to somebody else with your language. This is the same as trying to handle head coaches. And I'm not going to say I've always done it brilliantly, because I haven't.
Me neither.
Yeah. But use their language, don't use yours. Right? Try to let them feel comfortable and make them comfortable by using their language. And I'll tell you another one while we're here. This is a silly one, but you get S&C coaches are big dudes generally. More or not. Don't stand over an AT. When you speak to them, sit down. Small things, right? Make them feel comfortable. Don't intimidate, right? Not everybody is really confident in what they do. A lot of it, everybody, fake it till you make it. Everyone does it, right? And when you're confronted, when you're a smaller guy, or even a female, and you're confronted with a big dude who's got no hair and a big beard, which we all seem to do because we're all pumped with testosterone, is don't intimidate them. Open up, relax, good body language. If you're a big dude, sit down. When I get in arguments with people like that, sit down. I'm 6'4", right? So I'm a fairly tall dude. Sit down. Because you don't want to intimidate. And then when you stand up, then people know they are fucked.
That's an interesting point that you say, because again, those are things that are not taught in university, right? Like that's shameless plug again. That's why we have the fundamentals course. That's why we have our video library to educate coaches on that. Like, because those little things do matter, because you're working with people, right? And that's something 100%. That I've said, and as just as a pure strength and conditioning coach, you work with people. You don't work with barbells and dumbbells. You work with human beings and athletes, and they're going to work harder with you when you actually care about them. Why would the same not apply with a team of people? Physio, AT, doc, your sports scientist, your nutritionist. Like, why would you not think the same exact thing applies when you're with them?
Mate, you're speaking my language 100%. I think even the mere fact, like you describe your course, the courses like you guys run are invaluable because they're in the trenches, right? They're the real stuff, right? If you're not afforded the opportunity to get a good mentor, it's going to be courses like that allow you to develop, trench-like skills, like the front line type stuff. But your point about, looking after your athletes, being a person, be the same to your staff. And I mean, it comes back. I'm not an overly religious man, but do unto others. Like I try to do the same thing. I hate being spoken to disrespectfully. It actually sets me off massively. So why would I speak disrespectfully to someone else unless I was really trying to piss them off? And that's not a great place to be, So I think you've nailed it, mate. Good interview. You're doing well, Justin.
Appreciate it. Let's get back to what you had said before about, what does it mean to be a coach that does science stuff? Because now, it's interesting that 2 PhDs and a guy that is a CEO of a tech, company organization we're over here saying, make sure you're a coach that does science things. There's just so many science and technology options for coaches nowadays. How do you advise coaches to still be a coach and not do the dumb thing, like I mentioned at my old school, where an administrator purchased something that is bad technology because it was a shiny object? Like, how do you avoid shiny
Yeah,
object syndrome?
the machine that goes Bing. Um, yeah, Monty Python. Listen, I think I guess to put context to it, and this doesn't really happen until you get a bit older, but I'm a big believer in self-reflection and really having to think about what you're doing. And like I said, like the Terminator thing, I'm constantly reviewing what I do. So for instance, I used to have people come and visit my facility, like, coaches come and visit,
Yeah.
and I'd show them everything, right? And then I'd drill them hard and be going like, what do you think of that? And I want you to review it. Tell me hard. What do you think? What do you think? So I think it's the same thing, is trying to define what you are. So I wanted to be a coach. I still want to be a coach. I still coach high school now. And I think that in itself is a massive thing. I've felt so much more fulfillment, I suppose is the word, coaching kids in the last couple of years, and damaged kids at times, a lot of rehab, and getting them to play, their senior year of football at school. And that's the best football I'll ever play. Doesn't matter. They've had a cracking year, and that's it. Then you get a couple that go on with it, but that's fine. But I think when you say that, that's the science and coaching balance. So number one is the inquisitive mind. So, yep, I became a coach and I tried to learn. And like lots of coaches, mate, people go out and read. Dudes go and buy books. You see it on people tweet it all the time. Buy this book, buy that book. Cool. You're reading that work. But it's also not a bad idea to learn some other stuff. So, when we start talking about what real difference is, it's not a bad idea to understand a little bit of the maths, the statistics about what we're doing, so that we're not kidding ourselves, because you can bullshit to yourself. And if you go up the chain and there's no one above you to say, hey, you're bullshitting, so I think you've got to have a hard barometer on yourself, which is why I chose the path of doing a PhD to make this product, SpeedSig, because I didn't want to just flip something out. I wanted it to be well respected and well regarded, and it to be legit. I don't want to be. I'm not out there to peddle rubbish. I'm trying to legitimately make my group, my crew, my profession, my community better. I'm trying to help them be better. I think I need to be better. Like I told you at the beginning, I'm the front of the queue that needs to be better.
How can Speed Sig help out? And I'm thinking like the physio athletic trainers and any of the athletic trainers that are actually good at understanding running mechanics. This is not directed at you, but there are a majority of ATs and physios that, yes, they're the ones that might be in charge of doing the rehab because, like you said, they have the medical licensing, but they don't understand sprint mechanics as well as a strength coach does.
Right.
How can this teach them and still help them? And maybe even some of the novice strength coaches that don't understand, like, how can they utilize this / be able to learn proper running mechanics?
So what we're planning to do is build some online education tools around it that people can utilize to build a framework. Now, the way I built SpeedSig was around the metrics that are out there. Like, just for instance, ground contact time. We have flight time. We've got stride length, stride frequency, all that. Like, they're terminologies that are widely accepted. All right, so we want to use those. The problem is we learn about them in university. We hear them and we read a book and we pass a test, but you don't actually know what happens. So when you look at, like, a classic one is Aki Salo wrote a magnificent paper about the modulation of stride length and stride frequency, right? And how they vary between individuals. Well, it would be quite challenging for a lot of people to be told. The fourth chapter in my PhD was about classification. So different people run differently. I've seen wide receivers. I've got the data. Wide receivers that are big heel strike athletes, but they move. I'm not saying they're never going to be like an Olympic athlete, probably, but for their job, for what they do, they move great and they get picked and they play. But their way of generating speed is a little bit different to others. Mate, Stu McMillan talks about all the time, pushers and pullers. Right? There's different types of running. Now, when you look at a singular population, which is, let's say, track and field, 100-meter running, they're all going to be more homogenous. They're all going to be more the same. See, that's how I use big science words. Right there.
We gotta use those big pieces of paper sometimes, right?
I've got all them. I got my keywords written in front of me. Yeah. So you look at a homogenous population, they're going to kind of all be the same. But when you look at a population like a football community, where you've got a wide receiver, you've got a running back. Now you can have two types of running back. You can have a running back.
I was going to say that. You might have your scat back. You might have your slot receiver, your deep threat, right? Like even differences within tight end. Like you're going to have profiles within football. And then hearing you say that makes me think like, okay, baseball players, you're going to have your baseball players that have their certain profile, whether they're a speedster, right?
And they've said baseball players have got to rip around the diamond. So you want to understand, and this is my, I don't know if you want to call it my thesis, is if we profile first, so before you make a decision about what a kid is, let's get a picture. Let's get him tell you or she tell you what they are. Don't enforce my perspective on them. Now, you may then decide that, yes, we know that things like, the attack from the top, like we want to hit that ground, we want higher foot velocity approaching the ground. I will tell you from my work and the data I've got, and we're working on about, I don't know, I think we're about 40,000 samples at the moment. So when we run modeling, there's a fair bit there. But that attack from the top, I think is 100% right. Our data concurs completely. And the kids that are coming faster to the ground move quicker. When you have kids with a hamstring injury or, say, an ACL and they've had a hamstring graft, they lose that attack on the ground. It changes their ground contact time. It changes, they get more braking profile. So this doesn't answer your question about learning running mechanics, but what does the easier way to learn mechanics is to start talking about it in context and start seeing, well, that's what that runner is. Here's some numbers around it. This is how they differ. This is how athlete A differs to athlete B. And then for a strength coach to say, well, if we've got a puller, we've got a kid who's a little bit longer on the ground.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about our newest sponsor, Hawken Dynamics. Hawken Dynamics builds and designs software and hardware for coaches, athletic trainers, sports scientists, and everybody in the high performance department. Most notably, their use of their force plates with the ease of transportation and ease of use. Not only did I use them when I was at Towson, but I've used them when I've moved back here to Iowa with Tucker at Goldfinch. So check out Hawken Dynamics in the link down below. Now let's get back to the show.
So he's got a little bit more ground contact time. His center of mass is going to drop a little bit more. He's trying to pull. He's got to pull across the earth hard, horizontally. So his posterior hip strength needs to be stronger. Particularly, like I've seen that. I guess my pitch, so to speak. I do 3 case studies, and I got a kid, a wide receiver, who's exactly that. Blew a hamstring out, proximal hamstring tendon, running a 200-meter. In track and field at high school, right-hand hamstring, comes into football, and the team's saying, well, the kid's not injured technically, but we're really concerned about injury prevention. So we modeled him, we had a look, and we said, well, his ground contact time is quite massive, but that's how he does it. But the difference was he wasn't as strong as he was only just on average for the group in posterior hip strength. We got his posterior hip strength up above the group. His contact times improved. He was able to attack the ground a bit more. Yeah, they improved, but he still played fast. The kid never, he didn't get injured again. I don't think he was a brilliant player. But our objective as coaches is not necessarily to always create the NFL superstar. We got to get the kids that come to us. We got to get them on the park, right? That's our responsibility.
That's a good point.
Our responsibility is to the player.
And you talked about the pushers and pullers, but talk to the listeners out there about what about your vertical or horizontal emphasis, or your over or under rotators? Like how can that get improved as well?
Yeah, well, what we see so we have we created, part of my PhD was looking at the sensor waveforms and how we could equate that to a force plate. So we have 3 surrogate representations of force. I say surrogate because I'm not measuring force, but I'm measuring the change. The change in pattern in our data is the same as the change in pattern you would expect on a force plate. So we're seeing a change because that's the body's center of mass moving, right? So we're able to equate it. I did that in my PhD. Now, that signal really does give us an emphasis on, well, who's pulling on the ground hard, who's pushing vertically. So we can see the kids who go predominantly up. And equally, because one of our particular nuances is we place the catapult units on the lumbar spine with a custom-made belt. And because you're at the center of mass, we actually get a lateral signal. So we get a real strong signal on hip lock. All right, so how hip lock. So when you can see the strong kids have got a great hip lock, and you get a kid coming off a like a Lisfranc fracture, a foot fracture, or syndesmosis, that stuff where they've been on crutches for a while, you see that hip lock just flatten out. So in terms of the under and over rotators, they're always going to be related to stride length. So I've got my big hamstring we're dealing with at the moment is a kid who's in anterior rotation. He's big arch in the back and he's spinning out the back. And there are some other ways to look at the point at which the mass of your recovery leg, where that sits as your body weight transfers across the foot is an interesting concept. We're doing some work on that. At this point, I usually break out a whiteboard and we draw some pictures. Mate, I love a whiteboard and colored pens. Like, they're everywhere.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got a big old whiteboard right behind me in the office. You know, like I need it. It's right up on the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know how big it is, but I mean, it's big enough. It gets the job done, right?
Yeah. But this is the thing. Like, so if we can branch for a second back to your question about being a high performance manager, one of the best places I ever found was the whiteboard. Let's get on the whiteboard and draw some shit. You're not sure? Let's draw. This is what it looks like. This is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing this? And show them, educate, engage, work together. Don't talk at people, engage them. Here, grab a pen. You show me what you're doing. What are you seeing? And they buy in, right? And it's the same as an athlete. You know how to work them and get them in with you. So anyway, that's just winding back to that other subject. But as far as, SpeedSig as a whole, the aim is to try and get the lab as close to the field as we can. Now, I'm not going to say we compete with a lab. We're never going to, because a lab's gold standard, right? But if you can only use gold standard like once a year, ever, because
then how gold is it really if that's all you can use? Yeah,
that's right. It's not usable. So getting and our data is valid. Our data is reliable. We've published. We've done JSCR. Literally, I got an email last night saying it's good to go. So hopefully that will be online any day now. It's all edited and good to go. But the point of that is we need to have solid data regularly, and then we can detect change, right? So are we going to be as good when we're never going to be as good as the sort of work that JB and Peter Wayne and all those guys, but we can't be because we're not in labs and we're on the field, and we need to be on the field all the time. And one of the key things, and this is sort of a thing you were hinting on before, I felt, was that part of what I want to do with SpeedSig is make the coach's job easier, right? So make the data process as fast as possible. You know what I hate? I hate going up to the coach and saying, hey, we're not training today. We're going to do testing. No training today. Oh, man. You're nodding your head like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm nodding my head because it's not even just the coach, the sport coach, it's strength coaches. It's a waste of a fucking session. Like, testing should be training. It should be a seamless thing, not this massive day, because just like you said, let's give the kid the benefit of the doubt. What if Johnny or Jill had a massive test, couldn't sleep, and that's why they didn't perform well on test day? Or the boyfriend or girlfriend didn't do like there's so many other stressors that occur in their life. To make it one test day as the fucking holy grail, like, it just drives me up the fucking wall. Like, you hit a chord.
Yeah. So let's say we counter to that. let's say we go, well, okay, and this is me pumping SpeedSig, but this is what we do. So we can go from the top mount, from the thoracic mount. You can put 100 guys on the line, 2 lines of 50 if you want. And you go, we're going to run 40 yards, full clip. That's our test. But we're going to do it twice today. We're going to do it twice next week. We're going to do it twice the week after. And we're going to have, then we have 3 data points on everybody. So if someone has a test and has a bad day, you start to understand what real is. But because it's up on that thoracic mount, you pull that stuff through the API, a process like that. The athletes don't even need to know. The coach doesn't even need to know. It's just warm up. It's the end of warm up. We're going to do 240s. That's it. But what you just said, which I love, training is testing, testing is training, which is where the gym aware, perch, all that stuff. I think that stuff's great because it's giving you a quality of measurement to our movement. So when we talk about intent on the bar, right, being able to say the intent on your bar, so the bar goes from, like, I don't know, whatever you're doing, you might have a squat that's going 0.6, 0.65, and then you jack it with the same weight up to 0.85, 0.9. Like, now you're humming. You've put more work on that bar. So the weight hasn't changed, but the intensity has because the work output is now greater. So I think I agree with you completely, man. So to understand, and you know here's one that gigs me massively, is when you go out and say, listen, guys, we're just going to touch some speed, right? We need to get you out of the blocks. We need to practice. You know, you might be in a late preseason module, right? So you're still doing some speed work. You're still keeping volumes. And you say, right, we're going to do 320s. That's it. But I need them to be quality, right? I need 95% plus. Everyone's feeling good. We've done a great warm-up. Then they go out and because you've got 50 guys, you don't see it all. But then you've got the data. We go back, we run it through the API, bang, done. You can pick it up straight away who's missing out. Whereas if you didn't quantify them, you just did it, you wouldn't know and you miss. And I had a coach last year, a pro rugby coach, say to me, yeah, man, like you've shown me that half my guys aren't actually having a go. Because we do it, because we have to rush to get it in. We've got 20, 30 guys on the line. You don't get to see everybody. Mate, I'm not that good.
No, but how would you handle the thought process? Because this is something that I had a difficult time with when they bought that motion capture. They're like, oh, well, somebody will do it for you and then you can just interpret the data. And it's like, okay, but if I didn't see the rep and then I'm getting the data afterwards, I guess it's almost like when you have your GPS unit, you're not watching everything at practice. You just download the data. You have your, the key variables that you're looking at. So it is better than nothing. I think I just answered my own question in a roundabout way.
But look, all right, so you bring a great point, Justin, right? So let's put framework to it. So my philosophy would always be watch the rep, then get the data to confirm or deny what you saw. But it's not possible. Scalability is not possible. When you've got 50 dudes on the track, you try to keep an eye on them, you try to screen across, see as much as you can. You get your staff to spread out. You've got those 10, I've got these 10. Still 10 guys, you still miss it. So I think there's still that data piece is still ideal. It gives you the ability to quantify what's gone on. And I would say, again, if you want to bring back that high performance piece, I used to always talk to my staff about trying to hit people with a sniper rifle, not a shotgun. All right, you got 50 guys. So if I've got data telling me 40 of my guys ran really well and 10 didn't, then I'm going to pay attention to those 10 when we get our next exposure and say a little tap on the shoulder. Hey, last ones were pretty bad. Lift your game. Let's go. And you however you're going to handle that. But that's what data should do. It should allow you to, as a performance manager, to put your resources into those that need it. All right, real quick philosophy. Human systems and data systems. Data systems give you information, but so do human systems. Human systems feed back how someone's behaving, how they're speaking, and you use the two of them to put your resources in the right spot.
Anybody that's listening and they heard you say, lumbar and thoracic, what would be the difference and why would they have to choose?
Cool. So the choice is made for you fundamentally by me. When we're doing the heavy biomechanics, when we're doing the ground contact, the thigh angular velocity, all that stuff. We want the unit down in the lumbar spine because it's right near the body's center of mass. So we can do more calculations. When it's at the top on the thoracic mount, there's just too much noise. So we don't get as good a signal. Our reliability is not as good. So we use the lumbar mount. So we put it there to do the most detail of our analysis. But for other things like force velocity profiling, like deceleration profiling, we can do that from the top because we're utilizing velocity. In the near future, when we're doing more step mechanics around decel and accel, which we've kind of got again up on my board here, then we'll use lumbar again because the lumbar just gives us more detail.
So this also will help you out not only with linear running, but change in direction, braking forces and all of that.
Yeah. So with deceleration, if your listeners will know, if they want to have a look up, a guy by the name of Damien Harper has done a lot of work in decel.
Yep.
Yeah. So we use a lot of his stuff, but we've also developed basically the opposite of a force velocity profile. We do it in deceleration, so you can see where the peak horizontal forces are developed, and you want them as close to the top velocity as possible. So you guys are braking as hard as possible early, not late, because then it just becomes slower. And when Damien Harper talks about his early phase deceleration, which is how fast can you get, or how quickly can you get from your maximum velocity to 50%. So how fast can you bleed 50% off? You want that to be as quick as possible. Because under 50% for most people, you're going to be in a control position where you can make the next move, right? If it takes too long to get from top gas down, then you might miss a play or miss a defensive move by a meter.
No, that's all fantastically interesting stuff. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that you're like, you know what, I really wanted to make sure that we harped on this point or, had this discussion?
Look, mate, I think we've really covered a lot of it. There's always more. I mean, I think you've been, as an interviewer, I'll give you a review. I think you've done great, covered a lot of subjects, and a lot of things are able to interweave, because what we do as a professional does weave across a number of areas, right? It's interpersonal, right? You've got to know some mechanics to understand force production. You've got to understand, we put them on the ground, we need to understand biomechanics of locomotion. So there's a lot there. So I think we've covered a lot of it. And I think if I was to leave probably one thought, Speed Sig is not meant to be the panacea. It's not the solution to everything. What it is that last piece of information that we don't currently have. We have a lot of other information. I mentioned everything before. You've got Nordboards, force plates, perch, Jim Aware. I love all that stuff's great, but it gets us to the field, and then that's it. We go on the field, and it's kind of nothing else. So SpeedSig fills that gap, and it fills that gap so that we can understand what our people are doing in all of those three phases, right? Performance, injury prevention, rehabilitation. I do take your point that I think the education thing is a big thing. When you talked about people before, TK, Zach Higginbotham over in Cal, Devon, they're all guys that really understand running. And so when I came and spoke to them, it was like, yeah, right, let's go. I have met others who it's a tougher journey, which is okay. That's not a problem. But I think we've got to keep, again, if I can leave your listeners with that thought, that we've just got to be better. We've got to keep improving ourselves as a profession. Teach the young ones, teach them well, pay it forward, because someone taught you. That's something I always think. I was very lucky to have, some very, very good mentors, and, to be disrespectful to them for me not to teach going forward.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do this podcast with a buddy of mine, and we do just this. We just talk. It's called Two Coaches and a Coffee. But your point then was, now I'm going to show my age and my fatigue. What were we just talking about?
I was talking about taking pride in
yeah, right. You know it. So you just talked about your pride in the podcast. It's what we've got to be. So our pride is not just in our job, but in our broader role, which you go back to that thing about leading and engaging the ATs. So if you're going to stop the war, you've got to go and do something about it. You've got to take a step and take a pride in being a good leader. And I think that attitude, I don't think that attitude pervades everybody. I think
No,
that I think we get a lot of people, like you said, there's an arrogance at times, and I don't. Arrogance is never warranted. But I think that book you mentioned, I mean, you could young coaches could do to read that stuff for sure.
yeah, the book that he's talking about is John Maxwell, Everybody Communicates, Few Connect. And essentially the whole point of like one of the big points in the book is if people are falling asleep at your presentation, it's not their fault, it's yours. Like you actually suck at
Yeah, yeah,
presenting, captivate the audience. And we read that when I was at Iowa working with the football team because it's like, look, if the athletes don't want to listen to you, yes, they could be just being jerks. That's always 100% chance. But what are you actually doing to captivate their attention?
yeah,
And again, it goes back to like, what are you doing to lead your staff? Are you leading them because you actually care? Or are you leading them because, like you said, you want to walk around like, oh, I'm the, tallest, biggest person in the room. Like, come follow me.
yeah. Man, you make a great point about the communicating piece, um, and I think what you've got to do is you've got to move. You've got to change. If you're doing something and you see it's not working, change. Man, I had this really interesting experience recently. So I was talking to another tech company in the UK, and we're on a meeting. We're on a video meeting, and we're talking away. And he asked me, just pitch, give me a thing. So I'm talking away and doing my thing, and I pitched about 200 times, so it's a good story. And this guy's on the video. I can see him drifting off. He's looking around. And I'm like, fuck, I'm missing this guy. Like he's got me. Like I'm missing. So I kept changing. I'm moving around. I got more. I'm just getting pumped, and I'm firing up and right into it. And he keeps looking like this, and he's looking around. And I finish, and I'm like, I'm just cursing myself, going, I've missed him. And anyway, he then starts, and that was all internal. Anyway, he starts coming back to me and speaking and saying, and speaking. He goes at the end of it, he goes, "Man, that was the best pitch I've ever heard." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, man, I've got attention deficit disorder. You really kept me engaged." I'm like, "Man, you were all drifting off." He goes, "No, you were awesome." But I guess the point is, yeah, like you gotta, if you're seeing it not happen, make it happen. Like change posture, move, mate. Do something to engage people. Do something different. We've got a team in Australia who won the AFL this year, and the AFL. I mean, I know it's not a common sport to guys in the North America, but it's an amazing sport. Amazing, like the amount of like American football. It is unbelievable collisions and the speed unparalleled. But the ability to play for 2 hours, like not stop, go, like play for 2 hours
Yes.
non-stop and carry around 90 kilos and like run 16 kilometers and bash one, like it's amazing. It's amazing in its own right. But this team, their big focus is on communication and how they learn. And their coaches apparently are presenting, when they do team meetings, every team meeting's different. So players are coming in like ready to go, like what's happening? And it's a good thing. It's not like they're nervous. It's like, holy shit, what's happening today?
Yeah, they're
And
not
they're,
just sitting down like, oh, so and so is going to talk to me about this because it's this day.
yeah. It's game -2. This is what we're doing. And they change it up. So that whole logic of, um, engaging people through active listening. So you're looking at what's happening. You're reacting. You're working with a person to get a response. Mate, I think it's absolutely true. I think you've hit that on the head. Nailed on the
And
head.
that's where our listeners out there, you got to make sure that that's what you're doing. Again, like Jason said, like try to utopianly like make it better, pay it forward, because there was some coach that probably changed your life, and that's how you
Yeah.
got into athletics. Pay that forward to the other coaches you work with the athletes you work with, because you never know what that eventual ripple effect will be, because that's how you can ultimately start to see the change. And that's why you got into this, to make the athletes' lives better, make their experience in athletics better, allow them to play their sport, because you know the power within it.
Yeah. And you nailed it. Like you attract people to yourself. People are attracted to positivity. And I'm not saying, mate, don't carry on. Don't be like a pork chop.
Yeah, it
Like,
can't be that fake, like rah
no,
bullshit. No.
no. But if it's genuine and it's from the heart and it's enthusiastic and it's pumped up, you know, people are going to get there for it. And if you can speak enthusiastically, if we go back to challenging the environment around working with people who are a little bit difficult, like other profession stuff, is engage them, bring them in. One of the things I used to always say to our physiotherapists, I used to bar them from treating for 1 hour and make them all come to the gym and
That's
watch
awesome, as it should
and
be.
hang
Like,
out
go lift.
and come and lift, come and hang out, come and do some stuff. Hey, by the way, this is the exercise we're doing for that kid's glute or whatever it is, right? Feel it, understand what it feels like, so you've got some empathy. And I think empathy is a massive thing. Athletic empathy.
Athletic empathy. We're going to end it right there, folks.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.